So right now I am in my default program for Logger Pro before I've uploaded any files or input any data. So I'm going to start off by doing a video analysis using our Logger Pro. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to insert the video file. So up here at the top of the screen, we have our options. I'm going to insert, and I'm going to insert a movie. When I click on that, that's going to take me to wherever the Logger Pro program thinks the videos are going to be. But I'm going to say that this was downloaded to my computer, so I'm going to the downloads bin. I'm going to take the file that should be in a folder which I know, double click on it, and then that loads into my program. So it's going to show up and it's going to scale it down so that way it will fit within the application. Once I have that, the first thing I'm going to do is right click on my video and go to movie options. Here, I want to verify a few things. Probably the most important is going to be that the speed is going to be, well, whatever speed we need so it plays back a normal speed. For me, that's just going to be 1 times the original speed. I didn't play in slow-mo or anything like that. And also, I need to make sure that my frames per second matches what my recording device recorded in. So that way, I know my timing corresponds with how many frames per second were taken. This is a value that your recording device should be able to provide for you in the details on the video. Now, Vernier's Logger Pro does import that information, and it imports an actual frames per second that it believes is to be correct based off of the file. But that is something that you can override and type in whatever values you need. Another thing that I'm going to recommend is in video analysis, these options here. I'm going to click the box that says first VA point defines movie time 0. This will help us avoid some syncing issues later on. But if you don't click that, you'll just need to manually sync what the start point of your video is going to be with the data that we collect. I hit OK once that information has been verified. Once I have my video set up, one thing that I can do is after I've made sure it's playing back at the correct frame rate is click play. And make sure that the video looks good. It plays the way it's supposed to. It doesn't look like it's sped up or slowed down in a way that can corrupt our data that we are collecting. Now, one of the things that I'm noticing with this video is that at certain points, it can look like it's a bit blurry. That might be an issue, and if I have time, I can always go back and re-record the video. But right now, it should allow me to have enough information to work with here. Now, for this video, it is really only going to be about 4 seconds, but because of the basically 60 frames per second I was working with, that's why up here, I'm recording 0 out of 422. I have 422 frames to work with. This is my frame number. I'm starting off at a frame 0, and then it will increase to the end where it gets to 422. But especially for this video, I don't actually need all 422 frames. I can scroll through my video up until it gets to a point where I am interested in what's going to be happening. I'm going to be looking at the point where the ball rolls off the table before it hits the ground the first time. So right now, I've dragged my video cursor to such a point that the ball is basically off the edge of the table. And then I'm going to go through by clicking this button that says next frame, frame by frame, until that ball is no longer in contact with my tabletop, which right here would look just like this. Once I have set that up, I'm ready to start analyzing this video for the data that I need. To do that, I'm going to go to the bottom right of my video box. This icon here, it says enable/disable video analysis. I can click on that. It gives me all of these extra options here. And then also it's giving me this coordinate system up here. This is going to be the pixel coordinates for my position of the mouse. I want to actually record this, though, in terms of position. So one of the things that I can do is over here. I can select points once I have them, add points, but really I want to set an origin. I'm first starting the origin at my objects, trying to line that up with the center of the object. This gives me an x-axis and a y-axis. And then that makes this point the point 0, 0. But also I can say wherever I want on the actual image should be my point 0, 0. So I'm actually going to set that up on the ground. And then I can just change where that's going to be. I clicked on the object first just so that way I could scale straight down by following that vertical line to where on the floor my coordinate 0, 0 is going to be. I can also click on this next icon underneath it, the one that says set scale, and then I can click and drag over an object whose length I know. Once I'm done clicking and dragging, I need to enter the distance and the units that correspond with the distance in that movie. Now I used a meter stick, so that length should be 1 meter. Click OK. At that point, it took those coordinates instead of giving me the pixels. It's telling me a horizontal and vertical position relative to this origin of 0, 0. Now, if I know my camera placement relative to the object, I can place this photo distance here to try to avoid any parallax issues. And then also I can set an active point later on. But right now, this is good enough for our setup. I have a scale, I have an origin, and then I have my frames set up so that way I can start analyzing my object. I'm going to click this icon on the top right that says Add Point. Click on it. Once it's highlighted, I have this little crosshairs. I can place it over the object I want to analyze. And when I click on the object, it places that blue dot there. It records its position. It also records its time. So horizontal and vertical position corresponding with that time. In fact, I'm actually going to expand this a little bit more. And yeah, we'll just leave it like that. I can click on the object at the next frame. That advanced, let me just shorten this a little bit. That advanced my time by the equivalent time for my frame and give me my new coordinate. I can continue with this until I have analyzed my entire video in the area of interest. Now here you can see that my object that I'm analyzing is really blurry. This is why having a high resolution video recording device set with an appropriate frame rate can make your data even more reliable and reproducible. And at this point, that object looks like it hits the ground. So anyways, I have these 23 data points for my times, my x-axis value, and my y-axis value. This will be good enough because after this, the ball just keeps on bouncing. And I'm not interested in that time. So this is just going to be my information that I need. If I were to replay the video, it's actually pretty cool, where it just goes back to that 0 point and starts off from there. If I wanted to go back even before my reference time of 0, I should be able to do that, and then notice there are none of those objects or those points that I had plotted. But when I press play, they show up. This is essentially a motion map of the motion of the object while it was rolling off the tabletop. But anyways, I'm going to now right-click and move this video to the back. This gives me just my video here. My graph here in place of my video. This gives me my x and my y coordinates on my y-axis and my time on my x-axis. So I have these two trend lines, or at least these two series of data. I want to analyze this a little bit easier. To do that, I'm actually going to have two graphs. I'm going to insert another graph. Now this gives me an even smaller graph. So I'm just going to click on it and then drag it maybe to the top right corner, and I'm going to shrink this other graph and then maybe put it in the top left hand corner. Here's my data. Oh, it's even giving me velocity data. But trying to organize things so that way it's somewhat clean and my data is large and clear when I'm representing it on these graphs. Okay. Cool. So I'm just going to click on my values on my y-axis. When I click on this left one, I have all of these options. I'm just going to say this is my x values with respect to time. And then for this one, my y values with respect to time. This way our graphs get a lot less cluttered. I can also insert a couple more graphs and then see what this looks like. If I have a position time graph, it kind of just makes sense for me to do a velocity time graph. I'm putting my x velocity directly underneath my x versus time graph, and then I'm going to put my y velocity directly underneath my y versus time graph. So that way I have my horizontal position times and my my vertical position times. Let's see. Ooh, this graph in particular, this x velocity, it's really cluttered. Oh, one thing I'm noticing is on my y-axis, I basically start from 0.3 meters per second and only go up to about 0.6. I can right click on this graph and say auto scale, and I want to auto scale from 0. And then this did a much better job scaling it here. But one thing I'm noticing is I'm cutting off some data at the top. So I can just click up at the top, and then I can just type in wherever I want my maximum value to be so my data fits. In fact, I'm just going to quickly go and auto scale all of these graphs from 0. So these are going to be all of my data that I have. Once I have this, I can click and drag over whatever time interval I'm interested in. Up at the top, I can analyze it. I have all of these options. Or I can just go up here, looking at statistics, an integral, a linear fit, which this one definitely looks like. Boom. And it gives me my equation, assuming it's a straight line graph, my slope, my y-intercept, a correlation, and a root mean squared error that we all have here. I can do this for any of my graphs that I'm interested in. Click and drag over the area of interest, add my fit. I can click and drag on that box that gives me my information so it doesn't obstruct any data, just for whatever I'm interested in. I can even change the range I'm looking at in case I want to avoid any outliers that I may consider. Or I can just stretch and encompass the entire region by changing the length of those brackets. This final one though, well, I guess this second one, this does not look like a straight line graph. So it would not make sense for me to put this linear fit. Instead, I can do this curve fit. Then I have all of these options that I want to choose from. Now this one to me kind of looks like a quadratic. So I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to say try fit. And then it will give me these values, the root mean squared error, just so that way I can try to figure out, hey, is that a good value or not? It actually looks like that trend line fits my data pretty well, so I'm going to hit OK. And then I have my equations for all of these trend lines. Now, if I were to look at my data and notice that there were any severe outliers, like I'm seeing my horizontal, my x-axis velocity versus time graph, it seems like things are jumping all over the place. I can always go back and revisit some of these data points, or on my y velocity versus time graph, especially the end. If I want to do that, I can just go back to my original graph. Let's bring this to the front. And then instead of just graphing it, I can be focusing on my video. If, say, I wanted to go back and say, hey, this data point right here is not good, I use this top right icon to select the point, click the point I'm not too interested in, I can move it around, or I can delete it. But I would strongly recommend making sure that that actually is an issue by going back to wherever in the video it needs to be. Let's see, go back one. Okay, so in this case, we have our frame already set there. Next frame, maybe I could have done a better job there. It would update that information for me, so that way when I move this to the back, maybe my data worked a little bit better.